Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here live with Peter Simeti of Alterna Comics. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing good, John. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming. Oh, first off, I got to show my shirt.
Very
I,
nice.
I can't believe I missed it when you. I don't know how I missed it, but I was looking all over my house. I wanted to get some painter's tape and put John's on top.
Oh yeah, you should do that. I'm glad you got it when you got it because there's not too many left.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
This is the second time I wore it. I had to chase my cat off it. I put it out last night so I could wear it. But I got to say, this T-shirt is like really good quality. I've been buying a lot of T-shirts lately, and this is awesome quality. Just like Alterna
Absolutely.
Comics. How's that for a plug? Well, since I brought it up, and I don't know if you've been hearing me say this. Anytime anybody mentions Alterna Comics, I say they are the best printed comic books. Let's just pretend that they were just blank pages. The printing, the feel, everything is awesome. They look like comic, glorious newsprint. How do you, did you look for that, or is this a happy accident?
Yeah, the funny part is I've been looking for it since I started Alterna. There's an old post in a forum. I think it's Digital Webbing from like 2005. I want to say about me looking to see if anybody still prints comics on newsprint.
Oh, that long ago.
It's
Okay.
a long time ago, and Alterna was founded in like 2006. To give you an idea
Okay.
of this was before because I wanted to print my comics on newsprint,
Right.
and the ones I was working on at the time. This was before Alterna was even conceived as a company, and no one really knew of anybody. And it's strange because we went into doing things the way everybody else did, print on demand, and then eventually graphic novels for distribution. And I always kept revisiting and researching the idea of going back to newsprint. I couldn't find a whole hell of a lot about it in terms of printers that were doing it, and it's because I kept looking in the wrong spots. And I talked to this guy, Randall Bishop, and one day he was saying he prints his comic on newsprint, and I was like, what are you doing? Like,
Where do you
where are
get
you
this
looking?
wonderful resource?
So what it was that I put something again on Facebook, and this was like maybe 2014, 2015, something like that. I forget. And he had responded about that, and what he was saying was that it's a web press printer. And so before I was just looking and contacting offsheet printers, and you figure one of the offset type uh, sheet fed printers that they would tell me, no, that's for web press. The offset sheet fed can't handle because it's too thin. It would destroy and just shred, and
Okay.
none of them told me that. They were just like, no, we don't print on newsprint. We can't handle anything that thin. And I'm going like, well, who does? Because I'm still getting all these flyers in the mail.
Okay.
All these grocery store flyers have
Right.
newsprint.
Somebody's obviously printed.
Um,
Newspapers are still coming out.
yeah, yeah. And now what I'm finding out is so we've been through like four or five. I forget at this point how many newsprint printers we've used. This one I like the best. They've been far and
Oh,
wide, like you point out, the best
yeah.
quality. They've been
These are awesome.
Yeah, they've been awesome to deal with and work with
Oh, that's
too.
good.
It's been about 4 or 5 runs with them so far. It's been great. I had a lot of different problems with all the other printers, but these guys have been really excellent to work with to the point that I can't tell anybody who this is at this point because I don't want them spoiling it for us.
Yeah.
Um, so this is kind of we're keeping it really close to the chest on this one, but
Yeah.
with the printing, it was strange that how the evolution of it kind of took about because there's a lot of printers, from my understanding, that do print on newsprint, but they don't have the capability to trim to size, put a different cover stock on there, staple them. Because you'll notice, of course, a lot of newspapers and circulars are folded.
Right.
So they've got the folding machines and whatnot, but they don't have everything that's capable to make a comic book. A lot of that tech, a lot of that equipment isn't really used at those places. And the ones that did, because of the fact that comics and so many other types of magazines and whatnot started going away from newsprint, they folded up eventually and kind of went out of business, or they switched paper stocks completely and we're still around, but they don't use newsprint anymore.
Uh-huh.
But this printer, we're so lucky that they do. do, and they do a lot of it. So they should be around for a good long while.
I hope
And
so.
yeah, and I've been so happy with it. To me, it's
Yeah.
just it's like you said. I mean, newsprint, and it's just something about it. You know, it's comics, and it adds a warmth to the art, the feel
Yes.
of it, the smell of it,
Yes.
everything so intrinsically for me, and I think
It's
a
the way
lot of
comic
other
books
people
should
too.
be.
They're comic books, yeah.
Yeah. I remember because I started getting your comics couple of years ago. I think what was it? Mother Russia, 3-issue series.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Back
Yeah.
in 2017.
Yeah. I went Fourth World Comics out by me out in Suffolk County, and I was like, "What is this? Dollar 50? You know, is this an old comic that I missed? What is this?" And the guy's like, "No, this is brand new." And I was confused. I didn't know what to say to the guy because so I picked up all 3 issues. And I was like, you know what, this was a fun read, and I said I'm going to buy everything by this company because why not? You know, even if I don't like it, I don't know if that was quite newsprint, but it was like the closest to what I would call a quality comic, and I loved it, and I've been a fan ever since. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, that was newsprint. There was
that
one that
was
came out in 2015 that wasn't newsprint. That was a 3.99. That was the first time Mother Russia was put out in single
okay.
issue form, and that was really one of the first single issues we ever did in distribution. We really didn't put out single issues in distribution. It was mostly just graphic novels for about 10 or 11
Oh,
years,
okay.
and then the newsprint line kicked off in May of 2017, and we've used various different printers since that point. But like I said, this one I like the
And the guy
best.
you use it now, stick with them. Yeah, keep them like my precious, the One Ring. Keep it,
Exactly.
because I forget the seasonal. But I got it had Wolf and Batsy and T-Bird and Throttle in it, and I just remember going, this paper quality, this comic book quality is it was always good, but this is skyrocketing, and I've been telling anybody who will listen to me, I'm that kind of person, you know.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of doubters out there that the newsprint, especially in color, could look so great. I've got a couple of King Cryptids. Yours are in the mail, but
Yes, I
the
got my shipping notice.
King Cryptids just came out, and it handles black and white beautifully, but it really handles color beautifully. So this
Right,
is issue one. That was just issue two, and a lot of people say, well, can it handle modern coloring fine? And I mean,
definitely.
it's fantastic. And of course, it's always better to color comics appropriately because there's a lot of comics that are even on the glossier paper, which the covers are kind of on a glossier,
You're at the
like a semi-gloss. But
yeah
the
the cover.
newsprint, you can see there's no glare, which is great. That's another added benefit. But coloring them appropriately for the paper stock in general is something that a lot of different comic companies and colorists, I find, they're not all of them, but a lot aren't really doing. And they
Agree.
kind of, yeah, they oversaturate, the colors get a bit garish. um, it's a total, to get really nerdy with it,
Oh, get as nerdy as you want,
it's
Pete.
a total ink coverage thing. So the total ink coverage has to be, you want to keep it around 230 to 240 tops, but you really don't want to keep it at that because now you're really pushing the limits of the paper. And what I mean by that is that in ink printing, it's CMYK. So there's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black is the
Right.
K. And the total combination thereof could be 100 each, so up to 400. Now, there's very few paper stocks that can handle the full 400, and it's still going to come out great. It's going to look like a really rich, deep black, but you're going to have a sturdy paper stock to hold all that ink without it warping, soaking through, offsetting to something else that comes onto it. That's usually reserved for like big poster type things.
Okay.
But newsprint comics and comics in general that have pages going between them, you want to keep it 230 to 240 tops. So you want to keep it like something, like 40 cyan for a black, 40 cyan, 30 yellow, 30 magenta, maybe like 95, 90 around there, maybe 100 black, depending on how
Okay.
much black is on the page. So it's that kind of stuff in terms of coloring various different things. And on newsprint, you want to keep the black to a minimum if you have a color. So you don't want to constantly use black to shade the color. You want to keep the color tonally within the
This is
color
all
range
stuff you figured
itself.
out along the
So
way, right?
yeah, this is all stuff that you get. It's a whole other learning curve for newsprint. It's not as intimidating as it sounds at first, and especially
Always
if you're
sounds intimidating.
coloring, especially if you're coloring comics or whatever. I've got a graphic design background, so this
Okay.
wasn't that crazy for me to learn about it. But talking to the various printers that we've had over the years, and especially these guys that we use now, they're really communicative about what works for their system. Because that's the thing I tell a lot of people out there too. Make sure you talk to your printer. If you're a comic creator, talk to your printer. Know what their prepress is like. Know what their machinery is like. Get their advice on what kind of formula you should be using for your colors when you prep your files for print, because you're going to know then what's going to look good and what's not. And a lot of comics out there, I'm finding that the paper, the substrate they're using, they're not necessarily tooling it correctly when they color. So the coloring, sometimes you'll notice even at certain printers, or certain companies too, the colors will get all over your fingers as if it's newsprint, but it's not newsprint. That shouldn't happen, and that's because there's way too much ink being used, and it's getting onto the fingers all over the place.
Now, do you remember, like, you just made me think of something. Probably around 2014, 15, like Marvel Comics, you would get your fingerprints in the covers, like, and I used to, like, drive me crazy. I'm looking at a comic and now I got a thumbprint. I used to, like, that's when I got this easel where I do my showcase, because I didn't want to touch the comics. But your comics don't feel tacky. They look crisp. The colors are great, but they don't have that, like I would get comics on the Wednesday, go to the comic store, and they still felt like wet. It was gross. I'm a tactical person.
And it's not like you need to
Tactile.
hold it for a very long time either. You could just be in line,
Right.
waiting to,
I've done that.
and
I've
they'll be
swapped
like,
out
"What the?"
comics because I ruined them just waiting to pay.
Yeah, and that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't
Right.
happen ever. And if it is going to happen and you're going to get ink on your fingers, I mean, it should be on newsprint then at that point. Why not?
Right.
But yeah, in the industry, I found that when we switched over to newsprint, there's so many people saying you can't do that. That's not possible. It's going to look really bad, whatever it is. And then even I say, well, look, check it out for yourself.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. So
Your
it's
comics are the best comics in the industry right now.
Oh,
Now,
thank you, man.
I'm talking about floppy comics. I'm not talking about, like, a graphic novel or anything. But I'm
they're
talking,
printed really
like,
great, but the stories are good too.
Yes. I was getting to the stories. Yeah, I'm a Alterna fanboy. Yeah, I was just talking about just to hold, to touch. It's a shame that the big two can't hold a candle to your physical comics. I'm talking again just the printing itself.
Yeah, although some people might want you to hold a candle to the Big Two's comics.
Okay. And what you said about the blacks, like when I read Wolf and Batsy, I keep thinking about Steve Ditko. He was when he was doing Mr. A, he was furious because he could never get the paper to be white and the black to be black. And I think, like, if Steve Ditko was still around, you would probably be the only one to do him justice. It looks good.
Yeah, the black and white looks great.
Yeah, it does look great. Yeah, and the colors look great. Like I had a talk with Fabrizio Aiello a couple of weeks ago, and we would flip through Horch. It just looks like the way a comic book should.
Yeah.
And he started saying thank you, but it's the truth. I don't know all the technical terms, but my gut level is I saw that comic and I was like, this is the way a comic book should look.
Oh yeah, it's a blast from the past. We've done shows where between the cover price and the newsprint, people go, "Oh, these are new."
Yeah,
they think this is a publisher from a bygone era.
Right.
They go. I've had people literally come up. It was at Terrificon one time in Connecticut, and they go, "Oh, when was Alterna Comics around?" They're like, "Is this like a company from back in the '80s that I missed?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, this is right now. Like, they thought we were like a reseller for this, an old stock of Alterna books. Yeah. And I'm like, no, we exist right now. I'm like, check the cover and check the year.
That's what I do. When I showcase any of your comics, I always close up on the date. I said, I'm not pulling your leg. This is brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. And then they find that out, and they do what it sounds like what you did, where they at a convention they would practically run across the table picking whatever they wanted. They wouldn't even, Yep. And they come back with a whole stack, and I'm like, all right, $25. And they're like, you kidding me?
Yeah. I remember I had like an existential crisis when I went to a comic book store with $10, and I was like, $10 is like 4 comics. Nowadays, what, $10 is 2 comics.
Yeah.
So like I understand inflation and I understand people got to pay bills, but and I don't know, like, let me ask you this then. When Image Comics came out, I just remember I wasn't a big fan in the early '90s of Image Comics, and all I thought it really did was it made the comic books more expensive. That's really everything's been said and done. It was like they weren't that good. I thought the editorial was a mess. They were disjointed, and then like Marvel had to raise their prices and and I was like, oh wow, the Image Revolution. It just made comic book kind of unaffordable.
Yeah, they really pushed premium paper and computer coloring, even though I thought the computer coloring looked awful.
Yes, yes,
Those early days, especially. And there's still people who color comics that way too, and I get submissions like that all the time, and I'm just not a fan of it.
no,
But and you can do computer coloring really good. I mean, if anything, this is digitally colored, but there's a difference to it. It's keeping that mindset of coloring comics the way comics mostly looked for a very long time. But yeah, when it came to the Image books, I wasn't a fan necessarily of the stories, and I was a kid when they came out for the most part. But I felt like there was a big decline in story, and
right,
and a lot of the characters felt like these were sort of, you know, kind of like the characters you would see in a How to Draw Superheroes book. They didn't feel official. They didn't feel like their own characters for the most part. I remember liking Spawn, and that was kind of about it.
right.
But even Spawn to me felt like mixing Spider-Man and Batman, which at the time were my two favorite heroes, so I didn't really mind too much. But all the other characters, I could never get into them for the most part.
I
And
agree with you. Yeah, Spawn. I think I lasted 10 issues or so before.
yeah, I was about the same. Yeah, and that was kind of it. And it was really difficult to keep up with because they came out so sporadically. But every time I saw a Spawn issue at the local drugstore, I picked it up. But then it was about 10 issues or so in, about the same time that I sort of just flaked off with it.
So I wanted to ask you, because I heard you talk a few times, like you are like a comic book hustler. You're out, selling your comics, which I think is a lost art. Like so many people. Excuse me, pardon me. I'm sorry about that. So many comic book creators, like, they'll just put on Twitter, I did a thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How is that selling the comic? Like I heard stories that you were like in malls setting up, like trying to sell comics, to anybody that would listen. Even at at the very beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to. You're on Long Island, right? So
Correct.
I used to live on Long Island. I grew up on Long
Yeah.
Island in Levittown, and I would
almost
go.
moved there.
I would go to craft shows and like outdoor events and various things like the VFWs, and I went to a couple holiday shows at what is it, the man, that mall over by Massapequa, what the heck is Sunrise Mall? And yeah, and it would be like outside of a Walmart in the mall, and there would be like a craft show thing. You just rented a booth for the weekend. It was kind of close to Christmas time or whatever, and I did that twice. And this was probably around 2007, 2008. I moved up to Massachusetts around 2010, 2011, something like that, and then moved up to New Hampshire around 2016.
Oh, that explains King Cryptid.
Yeah. As soon as I moved up here, man, something paranormal came to me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And just invaded my brain with stories, and ever since that point in time, they've been percolating. So I did whatever it was in terms of getting comics out there, and it wasn't that bad doing the craft shows when I was kind of up and coming and whatnot. They were more fun than most of the bigger comic conventions, and it was amazing talking to people who would never go to a comic show, never. And they didn't want to go, and they didn't know about them because they didn't see them anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there'd be so many people coming up and going, "Oh, this is a comic book." They still make comic books.
Yeah.
You know how many of those conversations I got? The vast majority of people out there, they know what comic books are. They grew up reading comic books. Hell, they still probably like comic books.
Right. Yes.
But they don't see them anywhere anymore. So they don't think they exist anymore. I mean, imagine if okay, let's take, I don't know, let's take peanut butter, and peanut butter now is just sold in the peanut butter store.
Right.
That's it.
And
And
how
there's
ridiculous does that even sound
and,
to say?
and there's only one peanut butter store, maybe if you're lucky, within like the 20, 30 miles of where
Right.
you live. Maybe, right? Uh, how many people do you think are going to still go for peanut butter?
Yeah, I remember
You know?
peanut butter. I used to like peanut butter.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden there's peanut butter con, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? They still make peanut butter? It's the same kind of thing in terms of comic books, where they were everywhere and then they were nowhere. Even
Right.
when we had books in newsstand for 2 years, when I was talking to Toys R Us and we had them right before Toys R Us had closed out, we had them at Toys R Us at the register for the holiday season. And talking to people at Toys R Us that were doing the purchasing, they said, oh, wow, comic books, especially for kids, we've been trying to get comics in the store for so long. We'd love to get them at the register. I'm like, they act again like these companies that are out there going, oh, how do we get new customers? How do we do this? You don't have to change
Right.
up all your characters. You got to get the damn books in places. That's what you
Right.
got to do.
And comic book movies are the billion sellers. Like why? Like I remember
Yeah.
because I'm a construction guy, so I work a lot in Manhattan. I'd see like flyers for Fantastic Four or Avengers or and you can't buy a comic book. Like if you had told me in 1995 that there'd be billboards everywhere, that my grandmother would be talking about Thanos snapping and
And then
stuff
at
like
that
that.
point in time, it'd be the most difficult to find a comic. You'd be
Right,
like,
and
what?
nobody could find a comic book. The world is crazy for many reasons, and that's just one of them.
Yeah, it's completely backwards. And because of the fact that we were one of the only publishers on newsstand, we did well at Toys R Us, and then of course they had closed down. But because of the fact that we were one of the only publishers on newsstand, that became just a dead on arrival kind of venture. We got a lot of good advertising out of it, and we had made sure to put an ad in there on the back cover to tell people to go to their local comic shop. And we delayed the release so the newsstand would get the book 2 months after the comic shop did. Because I wanted the
Right,
comic shops to get the books first, and then if someone picked up a newsstand issue, they could go directly to the comic shop and go, "Oh wow, I get the next one right away."
right,
Like, even though the comic shop still hated that, they hated the fact that we were selling them in newsstands. It's like, guys, I'm helping out your business. I'm growing your
right,
customer base by getting people who never would go to your store. But
right.
now all of a sudden they see it and they go, "There's a comic shop locator on the back of this, and
Well,
go to your local comic shop."
yeah. How bizarre!
Imagine
Like
if the bigger
nobody's
companies
gonna
did
walk.
that. That would have been huge.
Nobody's gonna walk into a comic book store cold. Like some guy in I'm gonna walk into the store. What? By the time you're opening the door to a comic book store, you're already a comic book fan. And we, it's like we shut off the gateway drug by not putting them on the newsstand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I remember as a kid going to the supermarket or whatever. There's comic books. There's Archie's. There's whatever. Just old Charlton stuff. That's how old I am. Just there, right in front of me, as my mom's paying for something. Mom, buy me this. And then when comic book stores opened up, I was already like frothing at the mouth to get there. Now there's comic book stores, but the younger generation isn't going in. My buddy came over with his two daughters. I actually gave him Baron Rat comics, and
Oh, nice.
they didn't know what a comic book was. Six,
Wow.
6 and 7 year
Yeah.
old girls didn't know what a comic book was. You know, and it's a damn shame. What's going on? Why makes me feel like not you, of course, but it makes me feel like they don't want to sell comics to all the other businesses, all the other companies.
Yeah, and the thing is, newsstand works differently than direct market does with Diamond. There's a lot of different stuff to it. It's full returnability. There's almost no accountability. It's great in terms of exposure, in terms of setting it up, so there's a presence there for comics. But at the same time, if that presence is lacking, if that presence isn't really necessarily consistently there, and if it's not widespread, so if that footprint is really small, it doesn't matter a lick of anything. What I never got to, and I've had direct conversations with the people at Diamond about this, I would say, well, there's comic books that are being sold right now that are $1 cover price. Why aren't these in like Dollar Tree? You know how many Dollar Trees there are?
Right.
There's a lot of Dollar Trees. Get the dollar comics into Dollar Tree. You don't have to consistently even put certain comics into every single store. So you don't have to go to the breadth of it and say the 400 to 500 comics that were being released every single month should go out to the grocery. That's not going to happen. But you can pick and choose and look at your sales catalogs. And as a distributor, they're the only distributor in town for comics that would have strength to do this at the time when I'm talking about this, which was a couple of years ago. Now there's Lunar and Random House. And I mean, Diamond is kind of its own worst enemy with that. But at the time when we were in Diamond, because we're not with them anymore, we left in 2020. But around 2018, 2019, I was trying to talk to them about, getting into these other stores and leveraging the fact that, you can use, not Alterna even, use the popular titles, use the top 10 consistent sellers, and just get them out in the world. Just get them to different stores. Because otherwise, if a distributor isn't doing what they can to maximize their footprint, then what the hell is the distributor there for? They're just a really expensive postal service. And that's what I found they were for us, is that essentially they were taking 62% of the sale, and we were losing thousands of reorders all the time. That's what stemmed me to start selling these direct. And then eventually that's what kind of made us just leave and go, well, we'll just sell them on our own, utilizing crowdfunding and our website, because we're making more and selling more through there anyway.
Well, good for you.
That
was my next question.
Yeah, because if Diamond, to put it really simply, if Diamond, and there's not a lot of indie comic companies that are selling more than 2,000 of an issue. But let's say that you're selling 2,000 of an issue at Diamond. That's the equivalent of selling around 600 on your own, directly. That's the same amount of money you're making.
Cutting out the middleman.
Yeah, that's drastic. So if the entire comic industry essentially said, you know what, we'll just handle distribution and shipping in-house, and we're going to cut our cover prices in half, and then we're going to cut them, and then we're going to cut them in, and then we're going to cut them in half again for the retailer. And all we need to do is sell half of what we were selling to Diamond, and we make more money.
And you know what? They'd probably sell more because they're unaffordable.
And they'd probably sell more, because it'd be easier to find them. It'd be easier to order them.
That's such a good idea. And it's so simple. Why?
The system is so beholden upon doing it the way it's been done, even though the way it's been done is slowly going to strangle the whole entire industry to death.
So do you think it's good for the comic book business in general that there's more, that it's not just Diamond anymore, that not all the other ones are springing up?
I think it's the only thing that is maybe presenting a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit of Diamond,
but
a monopoly. I remember when I went to the comic book store, we weren't happy with it, but it was the only game in town. What were we gonna do?
And it's going to take a lot more than that, of course, because you could have the greatest distribution system in the world, but if the product is crap, it doesn't really matter. But that's like one tiny little bit of something that needs to change in comics, and it's slowly starting to change. But a part of me is also wondering if it's a too little too late, which it very well could be, because obviously I thought this a while ago when Disney had bought out Marvel. I said, well, in 5 years, we're going to see how things change, because businesses have their 5-year plans,
Right.
When they first got Marvel, they go, oh, well, we're going to leave them alone. Let them do their thing. Of course you are. You want to see what the hell they do.
Yeah.
You want to see how they screw up. So after those 5 years, you're looking at around 2014 to 2015, because they purchased them in 2009. All of a sudden, everyone's like, why did everything change so drastically in 2014, 2015 with Marvel especially? Why do you think? The 5 years ended. Time was up. And they said, you got to go a different direction now. We want you to go this direction. Now you fast forward another 5 years. You're looking at 2019 to 2020. You get all of a sudden different changes happening. People getting fired. Divisions of the comics all of a sudden getting shuffled around, and certain editors going, and all these other different things occurring. Now we're going to see another 5-year cycle. We're going to see drastic changes occur 2024 to 2025.
Do you think good drastic changes or bad drastic changes?
It depends on your perspective.
I got to say, the ship has sailed with me.
I think it has for a lot of people.
And people are obsessive compulsive. To stop, I stopped Marvel and DC cold turkey in 2015, and I can't see going back. I could have a 10-year gap that would drive me crazy. So I just had to had to let it go. And now that's why I'm so glad I found your company. I've been going backwards and buying back issues. It. I'm as happy as I've ever
Yeah,
been.
well, they've lost a lot of ground to independence because of the crowdfunding movements.
Right.
They've lost a lot of ground to manga and Scholastic.
Oh
A
my God,
lot
my
of
nieces and
ground.
nephews don't know
Good
anything
grief.
about comic books, but they can talk for hours about manga. You know,
Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Meanwhile, all we heard for what, 20 something years or so in the mid 90s to the mid 2000s to 2010 ish was about, oh, it's the video games. Kids aren't interested in comics. They like video games. And that's why they don't read comics. Meanwhile,
No,
you get manga and all these other things coming along where, no, they read. Kids read books all the
people
time.
like to read. Yeah.
This is new to them. I was a substitute teacher for about 4 years. I did all the different grades. And the kids, when they were learning to read, every single Mr. Simeti, can I read you this book? Mr. Simeti, can I read you that book? Every single kid, they love reading. All these stories are new. Every single thing to them is new. It doesn't matter if the Batman's been around for 70 years or something like
Right.
that. Batman is new to that kid.
Right.
You
Right.
know, every day someone is discovering these things for the very first time. And along the way, for some reason, people became in charge of these companies that they just don't care or they don't know or whatever it may be. But either way, I mean, there's so many different things that have happened in the entire comic industry at this point where the distribution angle, it's like a little seed, but the rest of it that needs to change, I really honestly don't know if it will. I don't think it will. I think comics as we know it in terms of the industry probably has about a good 10 years before it starts to look incredibly different. Not just sort of different, but like drastically different. And I think at that point in time as well, and we're never going to see comics go away. Comics as a medium aren't dying. That would essentially be like saying pictures and words are dying, and
Right.
they're never
Well,
going to be.
plays are dying.
Yeah, yeah. They might evolve into something different. The format might change. The way to get them to people might be different, but the medium itself is going to always be there. But I think we're going to see a lot of what we're currently seeing where there's so many people that are making their own comics. There's so many people that are not just making them, but they're very serious about them. And we're going to see a lot of those people with the readers being engaged right along with it, which is the best way to do it. Not a gatekeeper involved, but going directly to the reader.
Yes,
the
that is
readers
awesome.
are going to
I
be
can
able
get on
to
Twitter and talk to these
make
people.
these things. Yeah.
I have a nobody channel, and here I'm talking to you. I'm talking to Brian Bow. I'm talking to so many people that come on in the future that I can't believe want to talk to me. Who it's so much fun.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't know.
And there's so many people out there that are doing such a great job of building their own brand, building their own companies, however small they may be, even if it's just a self-publishing label. I mean, Alterna was really just a self-publishing label for me until I started taking on other people and putting their work out. So there's so many people where I'm looking forward to seeing how they grow over the next 10 years because as the bigger companies are going to be on a decline or going to be changing because let's face it, the bigger companies, especially the biggest, they don't need to put out comics anymore. There's enough material to regurgitate the comics and reprint them, repackage them for forever.
And they sell better.
Yeah, for forever and ever. And they don't got to worry about some crazy comic creator ruining their IP and, creating bad press for them or whatever it may be. And when it comes to character creation, people go, oh, well, they need the comics for character. No, they don't need the comics for character creation. They could just have a whole entire character creation department of whoever they want to have in there. And then they say, okay, well, you work for us and you're on salary and you guys create some characters whenever we need a new movie, a new TV show, a new animated show.
They got
once in a while, maybe a comic
characters.
or a book. Yeah, they got tons of characters already. But if they needed some new ones, it's not difficult. You don't need the comics to have these new things. So those bigger companies, they're obviously they're media companies at this point. They're subdivisions of a small company attached to a massive company. So this isn't something where these companies need this. And then you get the other ones like Image or Dark Horse or whoever, where they're either licensing or they're fully creator owned. So those companies don't own anything. It's like Alterna. We don't own anything. So it's empowering to the individual, the creator. it's that kind of thing too. Again, you're going to see all those stories be on the rise. You're going to see more of that. And I think the bigger companies are going to kind of transition over to just being full-fledged media companies that reprint and repackage and do whatever. And maybe once in a while there's a new comic story that coincides with something else.
Right.
But for the most part, I mean, if anything, and I've loved those companies my whole life, but
Yep. Yeah.
it's to me, it's about time. You know, the comics at those companies, it's sad to see at this point.
Yes.
You know, and there's so many ideas and there's so many great creators out there that are doing what they're doing that you don't need. You can still be a comic fan, a comic reader out there, and you don't need to get your storytelling fix from the bigger companies anymore. Because if anything, those are every single thing that they do lately. I turn around and it's just this 20th version of this character, this character mixed with that one. Who cares?
I don't care about the new variant Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I really don't.
And then when they, you know,
Spider-Punk.
Exactly.
I don't care.
And then when they use and abuse that into the ground and defile that corpse for the 1000th time, they do it to some other character.
Right.
And all it does is it ruins the property, which these big companies have spent a lot of money in. So they're going to get real tired of that real soon eventually. And it's going to be very different. And it should be very different because these companies have evolved past that. The comics is not their purpose at this point anymore. But for a lot of comic creators that have all these great ideas, the creators at Alterna, the creators that are out there doing independent work, there's a lot of Comicsgate guys out there doing a lot of different things too. There's some that in particular are absolutely serious about making these things the rest of their life and making these stories. Who knows in 10 or 20 or 30 years where these things go. So there's a lot of stuff we're seeing kind of like, and I've said this before a couple other times, we're seeing almost like the start of like the early 60s with Stan, Jack, Steve, all those guys at Marvel, which was practically an indie company at that point. And they're just churning out ideas and all these crazy things you've never seen before and all these different characters and all these amazing stories. And we're kind of seeing sort of that vein of a creative golden age, a burst of creativity among independents.
I think change is in the air in the comic book industry, and I'm kind of excited and I'm kind of scared at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it definitely scares the powers that be. Yeah. It scares people that are more than happy to, I don't know, to be the cover band, right? You know, if you work for, if Marvel and DC is your dream goal, technically what you're really saying is my dream is to play with someone else's toys.
Right, yeah.
You know, so if that's your dream, because you aren't really either confident or competent as a creator, if you see that dream is essentially the Titanic, you know, that's scary, you know. And then if you see these other people that are making all their own stuff, whether you like it or not, if you see them making their own things and they're successful and they've got a fan base and they're growing, that's frightening, man. You know, so there's a lot of people really scared.
I hear you alternative guys, when I talk to you guys and I ask a question about your characters, you're all excited. You know, I'll talk to a Marvel person about the X-Men and they're not excited. They're not theirs. You know, like, you know, they'll tell me something. Okay, all right, you know, whatever. I'm not going to mention the Marvel people's names that I've interacted with, but I almost feel like, geez, you're playing with Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Colossus, and you're not excited. And I'm talking to Brian Bow, and he's talking about Wolf and Batsy, and you know, talking about the music that he's listening to. You know, you know, I talked to Josh Howard, and he's going ape talking to me about T-Bird and Throttle. You know. And then I talk to these guys who are, you know, made it, you know, and they're not excited. You know, I'm like, geez, how can you not be excited? This, you know, 20-year-old me, if I was writing the X-Men, I'd be walking down the street telling strangers, you know, I'd be like,
that's how much of a difference there is within that corporate environment, you know, and it's not conducive to a lot of people. It's soul crushing. It's killing these people. And I have pity on a lot of them in that respect, but there's some of them where
they brought it on themselves, Pete.
I've had less than nice interactions with them.
Yes, yes. To find that I'm pre-blocked on not that I care about Twitter, but I use Twitter to promote my channel, to talk to you guys and stuff like that. So to find that I'm pre-blocked with people that I've never interacted with.
Oh, that's another aspect of the foolishness, right?
Yes, and that's how I kind of found out about you. You know, after I started looking you up, and I remember at the time there was this blockbot controversy, and I was like, why is this a controversy? You're trying to sell stuff.
It's common sense. Well, common sense is very controversial nowadays, so
What's
I
that?
guess common sense is very controversial nowadays,
okay,
so
yes,
I guess I shouldn't be too. But at the time, I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Because that makes perfect sense to me. You know, it made perfect sense to most of the rational people I knew in my life. It doesn't make any sense to go in there and just you're just going to block anyone and everyone because, I don't know, someone they follow on
Right.
Twitter or whatever. People follow all kinds of people on Twitter for
right.
Lord knows what reason. It's the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And the only reason that we'd even considered it was because there were a bunch of people that were Alterna readers for years at that point that had read the graphic novels, not just reading the new newsprint stuff, that were like, I'm getting blocked by some of the new creators you have, and I didn't even interact with them ever.
Right.
You know, we would promote a tweet and put their thing, and they would go to follow them or interact with them and say something. One of them was a fan of the person's book and wanted to actually tell them that they liked the book, and they were blocked.
Yeah.
And I thought, what's going on here? And then the very first time I found out about it was from submissions that were coming in. And I would ask, well, what are your social media profiles? I want to see, are you promoting? Do you have other stuff on there that I could take a look at? Some people use theirs correctly to actually talk about the comics they make.
Right.
There's a lot of comic creators that you would never even know they make comics because their social media has nothing about it.
Right. Yeah.
And then I would find that a lot of these different people who were submitting to my company have me blocked. And I eventually, it was like the third time I saw that, I asked the person, you have me blocked? I was like, why am I blocked on Twitter? I was like, why are you submitting to my company and you have me blocked on Twitter?
Yeah,
and they go, oh, I'm really sorry about that. It's just this thing, this block list program thing that I just use, and it must have had you on there by accident. And I was like, what is it? The block list?
Yeah, I can understand if people like having porn or they're saying something directly to you. You know what I mean? That's
yeah. If you've had some kind of if you've had some kind of unfortunate interaction with someone, that's life. I get it.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to talk to everybody.
the blocking tons of people you don't even know, have never interacted with you,
Right.
some of which are actually probably your fans.
Right. I keep saying I'm probably
strange.
the only person on the planet that has every Savage Dragon comic, and Eric Larson blocks me, and I've never even spoken to the guy. Matter of fact, I shook his hand at a comic convention and got an autograph, and then I go on Twitter to say something, and I'm like, and
isn't that the silliest thing, right?
Right. Right, and it's only because I'm a crazy person that I still collect this comic.
But that's how silly that is, because I also wondered, and I posed to those people that were pro block list. I said, well, what do you do at a convention when this fan comes up to you?
Right.
Is there a way that you can just block them? Are you going to have security escort them away from your table because of someone that follows someone on Twitter? Are you going to have them write down their entire history? Right. About every single thought they've ever had, every single thing they've ever done, when does it end? What is the end game here? Because it's silly.
I think it was you who said that how many less customers would make you happy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a brilliant quote. I'm attributing it to you whether you said it or not, but I think that's great. How many less customers would make you happy?
Yeah, and the industry is small. It's getting smaller. Again, like what we're talking about with distribution, with the footprint of distribution, that's small enough as it is. Everything is at critical mass in terms of that. I get it, again, if people have had a direct interaction with someone and it's like, all right, enough is enough, that kind of a thing.
Right. A personal pest is one thing.
But but like these weird preemptive strikes. And then, everyone's like, oh, well, it's for my mental health. And then you look at their page and you're like, I don't think you care too much about your mental health, because all you do is say horrible things to people. And well, what do you expect? When you give out there something to the universe and you're surprised when it returns to you, I don't know what to tell you. Right. You're just receiving what you're giving.
Well, we also lost this ability to disagree with people amicably. Well, I can't even say the word anymore. Like have just me and you we disagree about something, but we're still friends. If you disagree with somebody these days, you know, you're worse than Hitler. It's ridiculous. We're like a nation of babies. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's so strange because I've always grown up not just loving comics, but I've been a big sports fan. So I
Okay.
mean, right there, it's one of those, you like your team and someone else likes that
Right, right,
team.
right.
Do you like certain players? They don't like certain players. So I'm already used to that natural kind of conversation that comes about. I can't imagine extrapolating something even worse out of that. So if you don't like a certain team, or you don't like a certain comic, or you don't like a certain character, that then I'm going to start assuming that you are obviously one of the worst people who's ever
Oh,
walked the face of the earth.
yeah, my family's Giant fans, and then like a lot of my friends with Jet fans, and I guess we got to fight.
Yeah, and it's not like the playful fights, or even sometimes they're a little heated, but at the end of the day, it's like, you walk away and you're like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just, you're passionate. That's a totally different thing. It's so sad to see such a wonderful medium as comic books, which have, and it's like anything else on earth that has such a tremendous power to unite, and it should
right.
unite. It'd be like saying we all love pizza, but we're all going to kill each other because of the toppings
Yeah,
on
well,
the
you like
pizza.
Sicilian pizza. I like I
You
like
know,
round pizza, so we got to fight. That's it.
yeah, and it's one thing to have those playful fights, or even a little bit heated,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. But at the end of the
New
day,
York
hey,
pizza,
let's
Chicago
all,
pizza.
yeah, let's all just enjoy some pizza. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, let's all just enjoy some comics. And when someone decides, no, I can't enjoy comics with you, and not only can I not enjoy comics with you, but I don't want anyone else to enjoy them with you either.
right, right, right.
That's insanity.
I'll take half the customer base, but I'll have the correct customer base. I don't understand that. I don't.
Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know, a weird comfortable fallacy that people have
Well,
created. These
I think
illusions.
I think it's because a lot of these people are just used to being poor. A lot of these mainstream writers and artists they used to not making any money, so it's no big deal.
Well,
I don't know about you, but I got a mortgage to pay.
I think there is some truth to that in the way that I think they're used to what they've been told is the right path, the correct path, the thing that's always been done, and it's very scary to present a different way to
Yeah,
somebody else, especially somebody else who is probably very fully aware that they cannot walk that path, they can't do it. So like we're talking about crowdfunding, making your own comic, all that other stuff. There's a lot
that's
that
got to be
goes into
terrifying.
that. So if you're someone who's like, well, I just want to make a comic for a company. I don't want to handle every other thing that occurs
Yeah,
with
yeah.
being an entrepreneur.
You
Essentially,
made me think
that's
about that.
terrifying.
Somebody who writes whatever mainstream comic, they could just sit there in their underwear all day long and type and hit enter and send it. You got to print, you got to hustle, you got to get your comics out there. You know what I mean? You're mailing your comics out. You're doing it. Like I talked to Martina Marcota. She was 9 months pregnant, mailing out her own comics. You know what I mean? That's a lot.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
Or I
yeah.
could be. I was going to mention the name, but I won't. But I could be ex creator and just sleep until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, type, and then hit send, and I'm done.
Yeah, yeah. And
You're,
it's
you're right. You made me think about that.
yeah. That's why and it's a very popular comment I see from certain kinds of people that go, "Oh, you guys are just a bunch of dinosaurs thrashing in the tar pit," and I'm like, "That's actually you." It's sad because it's you guys are doing that because the
Yeah.
the system that you're clinging to is such an outdated, obsolete system, and it's been that way for so long, and all it does is feed into a really bad system at this point that's part of a corporate conglomerate that's doing far worse things than you could possibly even imagine, and
Do you remember when
you're a
Disney
part
was the
of that.
bad guy?
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember like Jack Kirby saying that he would never work for Disney. Will Eisner was terrified of like Disney taking over his stuff when he was gone. And now it seems like everybody wants to work for Disney. I remember interviews with people in person at comic conventions with mainstream comic book artists who said that they're terrified of the idea of sitting in a cubicle working for Disney. And now it's like it's like blasphemous to say like Disney is the bad guy.
well, when that's the problem with monopolies that are allowed to exist in that way is that they kind of become the only real game in town, and if you don't want to work for them, well, who are you going to work for?
Right.
So if you're not someone who's going to blaze their own trail, carve out your own path, well, you better start kissing ass, and forever is that gonna dominate you. So once you start going, well, if I'm gonna start talking bad about Marvel or Disney or Lucasfilm or this and that, man, oh man, like I'm never gonna work for them, and
Right.
then who am I gonna work for? You know. So it's there's a lot of different aspects to the entire industry right now that aren't just any more uh, as clear cut as which comic company do you want to work with, what characters do you want to write for. That ship, in terms of that was the conversation, has sailed decades ago. Now it's become predominantly what the course was set out for. I'd say probably around the time of Image, when they decided to kind of let all those guys walk, and then especially Marvel deciding to go into distribution for themselves. I mean, that's the craziest thing in the world. You're at your weakest right now. You've got a big competitor that you practically created, full of your A-list talent, and now you want to distribute on your own, and you want to buy up the Heroes World chain and everything else, and then that didn't go very well. It
Yep.
practically put them into bankruptcy, which then set the whole chain of events for them selling off the film rights, Fantastic Four and X-Men and all that stuff. And then that kind of was like a 20-year thing that was playing out. So all these different chain of events that have occurred, it's not just 2014 hit and then the entire comic industry slowly lost its mind, and then 2016 it erupted. I mean, we're talking about these wheels were set in motion
Yep.
from the early 90s.
I just wanted to say hello to everybody in the chat. Thank you, everybody. I'm not ignoring you. I just don't want to interrupt Pete. He's making some great points. But hello, Charlie's London. It's good to see you. I talked with her last week. Such a pleasant person. Everybody. For those of you who may not know, every comic that comes out by Alterna Comics is not owned by Alterna. The creators own them. So Wolf and Batsy is Brian Bowes. King Cryptid is yours. That's your. Yeah.
Yep.
And it makes so much sense because you're not going to phone it in. This is your baby. I thought like Image when it came out, it was good in the fact that everybody owned their own stuff, and I thought it would be exciting. But then I found like Vertigo at DC was more exciting, and then I think like when Image and Vertigo were at their height, I started to notice mainstream DC, mainstream Marvel, I think people stopped creating new characters. People stopped, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to make my name on Batman, but what I really want to do is, this thing that I totally own for Image or from Vertigo. So I don't see how people wouldn't want to work for Alterna, or I guess work with Alterna is a better term than work for Alterna.
Yeah, I mean, it amazes me at this point in time that there's so many people that will still work in these settings where they don't really own what it is they create, and then they're kind of shocked when they're getting screwed over.
Right.
I mean, that ship has sailed to me. I completely sympathize with the creators that founded these characters, and then who the hell knew, right? I mean, these things were like 5-10 cent comic books. Who the hhell knew they'd turn into million or $billion properties?
Right. Yeah.
And
you
then
hear horror stories about those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Merchandised and turned into film and TV and et cetera. So who the hell knew they were just making comic book stories?
Right.
So that's a whole different thing. But when you're talking about as soon as Image happens and the doors are blown wide open in terms of creator owned, I don't know how the hell anyone even wanted to ever work for Marvel and DC again. Right. Unless it was a very different contract, even if they were like, look, you're going to give me at least like 20% of anything that gets involved with this character. Otherwise, I'm going to Image with this character for 100%. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how anyone.
Like 19-year-old kids making like $100,000 a month, back in the Image explosion.
Oh yeah, well, I mean that was Image's biggest problem, I guess, right? It's like it's a lot of that success, too much success too soon, and a lot of young people, and
I was making $100,000 a month. Sorry, you would be firing me, Pete.
Yeah, it'd be like, all right, I got my one issue out. See ya. I'm making the equivalent of what I would have made in like 5 years or something somewhere else. Yeah, so there's so many wheels that were set in motion with a lot of different things, but the path, it's almost like the comic industry at so many different points there was a fork in the road and they went down the wrong one every time, no matter what it was. And then even now, they're thinking, yeah, how do we get more people? How do we diversify our audience? How do we broaden the
You know how
audience?
you do that? You
You
make the
know,
best quality possible, and then they will build it, and then they will come.
no, no, no. What you do is all of the characters that you've created that have made you millions, if not billions,
Change them.
change them all, vilify them all. They all suck. All the creators too that make them, they suck. They're all bad white
Right.
people.
Well, I mean,
And
just look around. I got a spinner rack over here. Behind me, I got a wall full of a room with
yeah,
50,000 comics, and they pushed me away. I was
right,
aware.
yeah.
In
It's slap a new skin color on them, new sexuality, new gender, like it's a
right,
costume change,
right.
and then that's the thing that's going
And
to
then get
attract
mad
new
at the people
people.
when they get mad.
And then when they fail, what happens? You blame the customer,
Right.
or you blame the diversification of
I
the
accept the
character.
blame.
What?
It's my fault because I stopped buying.
Yeah,
I blame me, and
it's
then block me,
completely
so
wrong. Completely wrong. But again, those wheels to blame the customer were set in motion during the 90s when the collector bubble burst, right? It's
Yeah, I
not
remember.
called the publisher gimmick bubble burst. It's
Right.
called the collector bubble. All of a
That's a
sudden
good
it's
point. That's a
yeah,
really good point. I never
it's
thought of it like that.
yeah, it's the customer's fault that they don't want to buy worthless pieces of crap paper.
Right.
Just
I
cases of
remember
it.
working
It's
in
the
a comic book
customer's
store
fault.
when the Nom came out, and some guy came in and he bought 300 copies of the Nom. And because we ordered, we must have ordered 500 copies of Nom #1. This guy came in and bought 300 copies, and I've never seen him before, never seen him since. And I bet you he probably has 275 copies of that in his basement still. He thought he was going to put his kids through college.
Yeah. Yeah. And but why did they get that impression? They got that impression because the publishers were making it as if this
Right.
would happen. Everything's a collector's item. Everything is, look at how much all these comics now are worth something because the Batman movie did really well in 89 and it created this whole burst of collectors that were like, maybe these are worth something because all the comics were either thrown out or treated like crap that had these first appearances of epic characters. So every company was making a new character just to make a new character. It's a new, whatever it is, a collector's item. It's a gimmick on the cover, et cetera, et cetera. But now, like all the things that are done today, gimmicks in comics, they'd make the 90s blush. So you turn around and you have this false collector's market with all of these bloated
Variant
sales
covers.
figures because of the variant covers.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy market.
I say every once in a while in my videos that I only buy the A cover. I'm not supporting that. If I buy a comic and I find out that I accidentally bought a variant cover, I get mad at myself because, I don't want to be part of the problem. And that's part of the problem.
Well, think about too, and I don't like variant covers either. The only thing I'm doing with King Cryptid is like you get 2 covers for the price of 1 comic. We have a little flip on there
cool,
for you
cool.
with each issue. But there's no, there's not like 40 versions of number 1.
Yeah, there's no chases, and
and that's what I love.
Issues, and then throw them in the basement so you can get the one that you can put on eBay.
Is that so? So this is what I love about it. So you get King Cryptid number 1, and then it opens to the story. If you do this, obviously it's going to open upside down. But this is the main cover. Now, people 10, 20 years from now, when I say King Cryptid number 1, remember that cover?
Right.
They might remember this one that I did, but they're mostly going to remember this one.
Right.
And that's what I love about it, is because now when I tell you Action Comics number 1, you picture
right
exactly what that is. Now, if that was released in 2015, 2016, or whatever, when variant covers were just all over the place too, you'd go, which one?
Yeah.
There's no clear image of that iconic cover.
Right.
And that's a big reason I don't like the variant covers as a creative individual. But in terms of business, it completely bloats the numbers and makes a big false economy in terms of, oh, look at how well the industry does. Look at how collectible these are. Look at the readership we have. No, that's not what's there.
Stores?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Especially based on like the 20 comic shops I've been in. And I see the amount of variants that they have. And then I see the amount that they have generally on the new release day compared to what they'll have a month later of that same issue, and it's almost unnoticeable how much of it has changed. Yeah, there's a ton of shops even by me that have stopped carrying new books that go.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah, they go, we'll do pull lists for you, but we're not putting them on the shelf.
I moved into my house 2 years ago, and there's more comic book stores around me than when I lived in Queens, but none of them carry new stuff. And it's so exciting. I walk in there and they got boxes of old stuff hanging up and wheeling and dealing and but nothing new on the walls. No new stuff.
Yeah, so not only are the new comics not in any other kind of store, they're not in a lot of the comic shops too.
Right.
And then again, when it comes to people wondering what's going on with comics and the industry being so healthy, to me, when people say something and they try to spike the football about the industry being a lot healthier than it really is,
They're
I go,
sales.
all you have to do is look at how many creators are out there and how many books are out there and how many of those creators are actually working consistently on a series. Instead of being like shuffled around all over the place, the books aren't really selling. You get even books at some of the bigger companies that struggle to hit 5 to 10,000 units sold. That's not sold to a reader. That every single book Alterna sells at this point. I love the fact that it goes to a reader.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It doesn't go to a shelf to
a customer's hand, a reader's
Yep.
hand.
It doesn't go to the shelf to languish and be there for God knows how long. And 30 years later, maybe someone comes along and picks it up in a back issue bin. It goes right to the reader, which is great. But all these books, it doesn't mean 100,000 units sell, that 100,000 units went to 100,000 people.
Right.
You're probably having numbers of like 50 to 60,000 maybe that sold to somebody. And then Lord knows what happens with the rest. I know a comic shop that's in Massachusetts. It's one of the bigger ones. But I went to their basement one time because that's where they have, it was a signing, and that's where they have their bathroom. They have 2 full long boxes of that Venom #1, that with Donny Cates and whoever the heck the artist was on that too. 2 full long boxes. And they go, these were all...
by the bathroom in the basement.
And they go, these were all overships from Marvel. You want some? You want a handful? And I was like, I'm all set.
Yeah.
But like they couldn't even give them away to someone going to the bathroom that's there for a signing, and they're 2 full long boxes of overships that they just gave it to them for free.
Right.
They're just schlepping them along, and this is the state of it's not a healthy industry.
No,
it's not a healthy industry at all.
It's not. It's really sad because like jazz, comic books are an American art form.
Yeah.
And it's like comic books, jazz, baseball, apple pie. These are as American as you could get, and the movies are making $1 billion. And I've got friends whose kids never read a comic book, but they are reading manga, like you said. And I'm a construction worker, so I work with like a lot of rough and tumble guys, and I used to hide that I read comic books because they'll bust your chops. Construction workers always looking to bust your chops, but they all say the same thing. Man, I love comics, and we talk about it. Couple of the guys, like, they'll come to work with a box of comics and be like, "Just take these. I know they're going into a good home." They all love the toughest tattooed biker-looking guy.
Oh yeah, yep.
They all love comic books, and they all say the same thing. I didn't know they were still making them. What a shame. Guys who love comic books affectionately, like they'll talk about like stories from when they were a kid as if they get excited. And it's funny to see these big, scary Viking looking guys like talking about Green Lantern in their youth, and they don't even know the comic books are still being made.
Yep.
What a damn shame.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And at the same time that it's heartbreaking, it's like nature abhors a vacuum, right? So at the same time that's heartbreaking, it's also extremely inspiring to see so many people now taking the reins of their comic book careers and making their own stories and carving their own path. And that's what I really try to focus on, that and stay focused on that, because the other side of it is, as a fan of both of those companies and many other companies over the years, it's become a massively depressing subject. And then being in the business of it for 17 years and having ties with distribution for 12, to get out of that in 2020 was probably one of the best things that I've ever done in my comic career. But it's, man, oh man, it's frightening for people. It really is. But I if anything, I look at that, and I love the aspect of freedom when it comes to creating it. There's no way I could put out a series like King Cryptid with Diamond if we were still with them. I would know that by issue 5 or 6, it's probably going to get canceled because we're not going to be able to sell enough. But like this, we sold far more than I would have sold through Diamond. The Kickstarter, the Indiegogo is almost at 40,000.
Oh,
and then the next one for 5 to 9, it's going to launch at the end of June. and I'm fulfilling this first one right now, and we're getting like 4 to 5 issues out every year. So that, to me, it's not just crowdfunding, it's like crowd surfing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you jump back and you just go, I hope they catch me. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing with crowdfunding, in terms of you're just hoping that the people are there for you, and as long as you are being earnest with them in terms of what you're doing as a creator and what your goal is here, and you're transparent with, hey, look, take a look at the preview pages, this is what the character's about, you're passionate about it, you'll find that, at least in my experience and from what I've seen other people go through as well that are passionate about their projects too, they're being met with that crowd that catches them and makes sure that, okay, yeah, this is cool, we want to be a part of this too. In the other
Every
way,
Alterna fan that I know is like ecstatic about the company. That there's no casual Alterna fan. Everybody who likes Alterna.
It's great.
Diehard.
But in the other way, where it's being a part of like the corporate machine in that respect, it turns into this nameless, faceless, soulless kind of existence, and there's so many creators I've spoken to over the years that they've left these companies and now they're doing their thing independently. And some of them that just they can't wrap their mind around how to do it properly. They go, I don't understand.
Task.
They go, I don't understand. I was on an issue that sold like 100,000 units, and I can't sell 10 of my comics at a show. I can't sell 100 on a crowdfunder.
That's because they were fans of Green Lantern, not you. Like
exactly.
You got to start all over again. Yeah.
Yep. And
they had 80 years of publicity behind them. I don't mean to be mean to these people, but
no. And that's what I've told them too. Yeah, you got to get out there. You got to show how excited. It's not the same system.
You got to be like Stan Lee. Stan Lee sold Stan Lee. And then he sold it. And what I liked about Stan Lee was like, okay, that didn't work. Let's go on to the next thing. The next thing's great. The next thing's great. This guy's the best artist in the world. This guy's the best writer in the world. This girl's the best. It was infectious. My brother, who's not really into comic books, we saw Stan Lee, and he was like, oh my god, like a little kid, because. And who's doing that now? Except for you. You're the only one.
Well, maybe in terms of a publisher at a company, I guess maybe you could say I don't know, Todd McFarlane or something like that.
Oh yeah, okay. Todd McFarlane is Todd's a charismatic guy out there.
Yeah, Todd's pretty good at getting the word out there and the excitement and enthusiasm up, and staying relatively transparent with a lot of the different readers when certain things happen. He talks about it. I've seen him anyway talk about it, and especially about being honest with the industry. If anything, the industry, if it had a lot more Todd McFarlane's being honest about the things that are occurring.
I'm embarrassed that I forgot about him.
Yeah, Brian Pulido does a great job as an indie creator. Absolutely, there's a lot of indie creators out there doing fantastic work in terms of preaching the gospel of comic books. But that's the thing, is everybody in comics, when Stan had passed away, goes, well, now who's going to be Stan Lee? And it's like, it's one thing for the fans to ask a question like that, but every single creator in comics, it should have been going, I could be my own Stan Lee.
Yeah, they all should have been fighting each other to be Stan Lee,
Yeah. If anything, as a kid growing up, my parents thought that Stan Lee created Marvel and DC, because DC didn't really have a Stan Lee.
Right. Right.
You would just comics. Who makes comics? Stan Lee.
Stan Lee did such a good job selling comics that a rising tide floats all boats. So there is a little bit of truth to that.
But so it always kind of was confusing to me that, like, well, when you find out all these different companies exist, like, why don't they all have somebody that's out there, waving the flag of the company, of the getting excited about the new characters and the new stories, or the new creative team on a book, or whatever it may be. I mean, to me, it seemed like that was a part of it. That was an exciting part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's baffling. But again, nowadays we have the ability to do these YouTube shows or social media, or whatever. Right. And I mean, there's always a pro and con with everything, but this is a time unlike any other where you're able to do something like this, have your own channel, go on other channels, whatever it may be, and almost have a virtual book tour, and you couldn't really do that before.
Hey, you're on everybody's TV. Nobody's watching, commercial television anymore. Everybody's watching something streaming.
Yeah, that amazes me. So right now, what do we have? We have about we've had 5 to 9 people or so watching.
Right.
I mean, 5 to 9 people. So you might think, oh, that seems like it's a small amount because some people get
Well,
more or
it's big for
whatever.
me.
But all I could think though is that's amazing to me. Just having 5 to 9 people that are sitting there
Right.
and watching something like this.
Well,
You know,
that's what this
10 years
channel's supposed to
ago,
be. Like I envision
that
worlds sitting
wasn't
around
even
the table
possible.
talking comics. That's what my dream was. So just come on over, we'll talk comics, but we can't do it. So this is the next best thing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And
It's incredible.
and what you said you were in Vermont. So here I am talking to
Well,
somebody
I'm
in
New
Vermont.
Hampshire,
Oh, New Hampshire. That's I keep saying that. We're talking about the other day. I had people, from London talking. It's so much fun. Why aren't they doing? I don't know. Are the mainstream doing this? I don't know. I'm blocked. I don't know. I can't find out.
It's well, I tell you, when we were close to leaving Diamond, it was about 2019 or so when I started really thinking, we're selling more on our own than we are through Diamond. I really have to start thinking, when do we leave? An exit strategy. And then the pandemic happened and exacerbated all of that.
Yeah.
But I was looking around in 2019 at their previews, the previews world YouTube that they have, where they interview different creators sometime or talk about books coming up or whatever it may be. And they're still getting around the same interaction that they got then that they get now, which isn't a whole hell of a lot. And that's the distributor of comics.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be getting a lot of interaction. They should be getting a lot of engagement, a lot of views. And I mean, to be honest, I think there's videos on your channel, as fledgling as you may think it is. There's videos on your channel that have more views than they do.
Yeah.
It's strange, but at the same time, it's just as strange as when I thought, well, if we go direct and we sell direct, there's no possible way we're going to sell more than we do through distribution. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And then lo and behold, we did, and so many other people do. So there's a lot of different things about the comic industry that don't make a hell of a lot of sense, and I wish more people would be entrepreneurial about it. If they've got even the inkling towards that capacity, I wish they would just go for it.
Well, look at it. I remember an interview with Gene Simmons of Kiss. Some guy was talking to him and said, I'm a great songwriter and guitarist, and I want to do everything. I want to run my own company. Gene Simmons was just like, listen, he goes, you may be a good guitarist, you may be a good songwriter, but are you a good publisher? Are you a good lawyer? Are you a good salesman? Are you a good distributor? And the guy had to stop. So Gene Simmons was like, get yourself some help. So I understand how scary that would be, because you're your own distributor, you're your own salesman, you're your own editor-in-chief. So back to what we were saying before about names I'm not going to mention who are working for Marvel in their underwear at noon. That's easier. That's just easier to do. It's objectively easier I'm gonna put on my dirty T-shirt. I'm gonna watch cartoons all night. And I'm going to wake up and I'm going to type for a couple of hours, hit send to some company, and that's it. That's all I got to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch
of. Is a lot of work.
There's been dozens of creators that I've published over the years at Alterna where that was the mentality too. That they would get a book out in previews or published, and that would be it. And I'd go, why don't you ever talk about your book? Aren't you excited about your book? It's out there. You put all this time and effort into your book. And they go, oh, well, I got to make the next one. And that one's out. And, it's been out for a year or something at this point. I'm not talking about that one anymore. And I go, I don't know how you could do that.
I'd be telling everybody. Everybody.
And of course, the end game for a lot of them that were of that attitude, it would be to get a movie deal. It would be to, maybe work for one of the bigger companies. These were all stepping stones, So there's so many people in comics, not just at the bigger companies, but even at the smaller ones, especially at the smaller ones.
You're 100% right.
As stepping stones.
A lot of people at Marvel right now, they don't want to write comics. They want a TV show, and this is their stepping stone. You could just tell, 100%. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, right now our submissions are open on Alterna, and they used to be open 24/7. Now I've just got them open 2 times a year, and I'm honestly thinking possibly not even having submissions open anymore after this year, because I'm getting too many people coming in. They're rushing to make their comics. They're not being honest with themselves on where they're at. They're not ready to be published at all. A lot of the time, this is their first book. and they've only made a couple of pages, and they're very substandard pages. So the worst thing that could happen for this individual is that if I was someone that was like, oh, I'll just publish whatever, which is bad for everyone involved, bad for the reader, bad for me, bad for them.
Right.
So if I just came along and said, fine, yeah, let's have a contract for you and get me this book at this date, and then we'll publish it. Now what do they have to do? Now they have to make the book. Now they're contracted to make that book, and they got to get that book done. They don't even know if they want to do that book.
Yeah.
You know, I'm seeing way too many submissions that are coming in that are just people that are like, yeah, I like comics. I guess I'll make one. It's very strange to see that attitude, but it's a very modern day attitude over the past 17 years. I've only seen that attitude over the past 3 years, where I'm seeing so many people just rushing to make comics. And then that mindset of the screenwriter, the whatever it may be, this is the stepping stone for that. I'll get people in a submission. I got one literally today talking about that this would be a springboard for a mobile game and a TV series and a and a streaming thing. And I'm like,
no, it's not.
I put it right in the submission. I'm like, impress your readers. Don't care about impressing a producer. I put it right there in the submissions and I explain why. Because there's so many people out there that are so desperate to impress the big wig at the studio or whatever it may be, that they don't care about making the greatest comic they can make. They care about how can they get this as a foot in the door for the studio, the production company, the whatever it may be. And instead, I'm like, can we just entertain a comic book reader? So is that okay with you?
Like, I do think that these Marvel movies are winding down, and DC, stumbled out of the gate. So do you think, like, let's just pretend that this next Marvel movie bombs and it's over. Do you think that would help comic books? Like, people submitting to your company would be people who actually like comics rather than people who think, oh, this is a stepping stone.
I think if the comics were floundering right now, but the comics were still great, but they were floundering because of poor marketing or distribution, I think the movies doing bad would make the comics do really good.
Yeah.
But the comics are crap. The distribution is relatively crap. The marketing is relatively crap. The comics are kind of just like a propped up zombie, being fed a finger at a time to stay alive. Yeah. So if the movies kind of start bombing, that house of cards is going to tumble big time. And it's going to tumble specifically not because of the customer, but because the people at the top are going to go, we got to start cutting losses here.
Right.
Which division isn't really doing it for us? Oh, the publishing division. Goodbye.
No, but do you think we'd get better submissions once the comic book movie's off the table right now?
So would I get better submissions?
Yeah.
You think? No, I don't. I think I would get less.
You would get
less. I think I would get less.
But I was wondering if you would get people who just like, I just want to make comics.
I think I would definitely get more of that, but I don't know if I would get more in the quantity of that. But also there's something else too that I've been also prepping myself for, which is the reality in which all the other things we spoke about, which is crowdfunding and creators being entrepreneurial. I'm the last person on earth that's going to tell someone you need a publisher in comics to make it, because I didn't need a publisher in comics. I carved my own path. Yeah. So it'd be hypocritical of me to say, well, you need me to make it. I hope I can add some value with my experience and what I can do to help a creator that I think is on the cusp. But other than that, if there's someone who is entrepreneurial, knows what they want, has a vision for it, has the drive, they can absolutely do it. They don't need me whatsoever. I don't expect to see submissions from those people.
Okay.
So I've been preparing myself for what may be the potential reality of that one day, which is why I'm more than comfortable to make King Cryptid issues for the rest of my life. I got more than enough stories to do it. I'm not worried about my future whatsoever. We've got a good stable of creators at Alterna that want to make ongoing stories too.
You guys are on fire right now. This it's such good. Everything that comes out by Alterna right now is something I look forward to.
Yeah, so the ongoing series of, Wolf and Batsy, Blood Realm, Unit 44, we've got Red Koi, King Cryptid, which is the first 4 issues that are just starting to come out now through my campaign. It came out on a Wednesday, which is a great anthology series. I feel like, Horace H. Hoover. I mean, we got some really heavy hitters in terms of characters, stories, and what's to come especially. So looking at all of those titles and those creators those are the kinds of creators that I want to have at Alterna. I want to have these creators that go, I got 100 stories in me at least,
Yeah.
So as long as you want to publish them, as long as the readers want to read them, I'm here to make them.
Yep.
And that kind of a breed of creator in comics is dying out in some way, shape, or form for right now. I think until we get a little bit deeper into it, where you look 10 to 15 years from now, and we've inspired a whole new generation of creator that wants to make their own stories and wants to make all these things come to fruition. I think then in those 10 to 15 years we're going to see another creative wave that's kind of like, it's almost like I'm viewing it like as a sports franchise. We're in like a rebuilding phase right now.
Yeah.
And so we're getting the farm team is now becoming the hot rookies, and these rookies are eventually going to become veterans that are going to be able to be in a better position for these up and comers, this next wave that comes along in about 10 or so years. So as we get to that point, we're going to see a lot of things. Of course, we're going to see these properties that are right now here. We're going to see them grow. We're going to see those characters become bigger and better, hopefully. And then we're going to see a lot of new ideas and a lot of new people coming in, especially with their own ideas. And I think because of the stuff that they're seeing, getting inspired by from this wave of creators right now, that has a very different mindset than what has been used to being around in comics. We're going to see, I think, a resurgence in a lot of stuff, and a good one. I think we're going to see a really good one in terms of independent creativity.
I think the big two are in a decline. I mean, just the fact that Spider Punk and Spider this and Spider Chicken or whatever, it just shows you that nobody is bringing new stuff.
The well is run dry. Yeah.
And then I turn around and I do see, like, Tonic Mole with the Saving the World, which I think is a wonderful comic. Wolf and Batsy, Cyber Frog. Here's a guy that created something when he was 19 years old, and now he went back to it. And, the guy's doing phenomenal success. It's, why wouldn't you? It's your own stuff. I have my ideas for a comic book, but I'm not there yet. I'm still cooking that stew. But if I ever do, you better believe I'm going to be walking down the street, knocking on people's door. Buy this, look at this. This is mine. Whatever. I just don't understand it. And if I was working for Marvel, I don't care. Why would I? If I'm going to be selling Nightcrawler, how does that really help me? What does that do for I don't know.
Yeah, in a philosophical sense too, I look at it as life is short. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed to you.
Yeah.
You're barely guaranteed today, and yesterday you can't do a damn thing about it.
Correct.
So all you really have is the moment. Now, if in the moment you're doing something with your life that doesn't bring you joy, doesn't bring you happiness, isn't something you want to do with it, try to find a way to find that joy, to pursue that happiness. Because life is just, it really is. It's too short. It's cliched, but it's too short.
You're right.
And you only have enough time. And if you feel with every fiber of your being that this is what you're meant to do with your life, this is what you want to do with your life, then at least try to work towards doing that with your life. So if it's making comics and you want to do that, or if it's making movies, if you want to make movies, then stop futzing around in comics and go be a part of a movie.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
if that's what you want to do.
Go work on a film set. Go, rub elbows with people that need to get you connected to go live out that dream, whatever it may be.
I also feel like with the big two, it's like they're making up a pet character, and now I'm told that it's the greatest character in the world. I'm like, this character's only 7 or 8 years old, and you're gonna put it in a movie, and I guarantee you this movie's guaranteed to bomb. Nobody cares. You can't just force a fan base. You can't just fake it. You can't just tell us this is what you like. And I feel that's killing the big two. That they're telling us what we're supposed to like. We're wrong if we don't like it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other. That could be a whole other show for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's whatever it is. It doesn't have to be comics or movies or something spectacular or it brings you fame or fortune or whatever. There's tons of things that people have. Their dream is to, like you said, you work construction. There's tons of people I knew when I was growing up. Their dream was to build buildings and be on construction sites and all that, and they pursue these things. Pursue that kind of stuff. To me, it's so sad when you see people who you think they may be living a dream, but it's just like some kind of a nightmare for them. Um,
Yeah, I was
we
I was a
shouldn't have
school
anybody like
teacher.
that in comics.
I was a school teacher. And I was 35 years old, and I was miserable. And that's I switched careers. And I, I'm at 35 years old to switch your career, I think is a big deal.
Oh yeah,
Anybody
that's a
can
big
do it.
move.
Anybody can do it. I don't know. I see too many people miserable in their jobs. Go out and do it. Like you said, life is too short.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But and once that joy is brought back into comics, and it's people who really want to make these things and have these stories to tell and have this passion for the characters they're creating and the stories they're telling, that joy translates to the stories that people
Yep.
read.
Yep. I can tell Brian Bauer is loving the hell out of Wolf and Batsy when I read that comic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can
He
tell
fiercely
Fabrizio
loves those
loves
characters.
H. Hoover. I could just tell it. It comes out. You can't fake that. You can't fake that enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so great. So I guess we'll close out now because I got to go to bed, but I wake up at 4.
Oh.
But I wanted to close out with so when's AlternaCon? I keep saying, come on over here. I got a big basement. We'll all have AlternaCon.
I don't know. It's funny you say that because years ago I thought about something like that, like AlternaCon, CreatorCon, something like that. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a fun thing we could at least do virtually if we don't do it physically. But yeah, it's
do that like
I know
legendary
you'd love to see
Submariner
it.
comic where all the guys got together. They did a jam. Everybody drew, what was it, Submariner versus the Human Torch in 48 hours. Everybody come down here. We'll have Wolf and Batsy fighting King Cryptid.
Oh my lord!
That would be
that would be fun.
Yeah,
man. Oh man, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
We could dream.
Absolutely.
But thanks a lot, Pete. We've been talking for a while. I got to get to bed.
I got to get back to work, so it works out for me.
Those comics, crack that whip. But thank you so much for coming. I appreciate this. You're the best for coming. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining and listening. And where can we get Alterna Comics before we leave?
You can go to alternacomics.com, and we've got everything listed on there. We've got information about the titles. We've also got them available for sale. And if you purchase $30 or more and you live in the U.S., you get free shipping. So these are already the most affordable comics pretty much in the entire comic industry. But we make it a little bit easier on you. If you sign up for the newsletter, you get a 10% coupon off your first order. And come check us out. We got a little bit of something for everybody.
Yep, you do. You got a lot of different genres. It's not just one type of comic too. There's different stuff for everybody.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And
I'll put links in the description too.
And they're escapist with heart too. So if you're worried that these comics are really embroiled in modern day whatever is going on, no, not at all. Some publishers, they like to offer you a world that is just outside your window. Mirror that in the comics, but Alterna, we offer you a window into many other worlds. So
and you also
we like to do that.
You also have comics that kids could read.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that people are forgetting. You got to get little kids interested in comics.
Yeah, we've got readers that have actually grown up with Alterna. We've had readers that started Alterna reading when they were like 12. We've been around for 17 years. Now they're like practically 30, and they've grown into reading some of the more mature and violent type titles. And I mean mature, like there's mature themes and things like that are more intense than the all ages titles.
Yeah,
so
I'm a big fan of all ages comics. I think there's something missing. If an adult could read it, and a child could read it, I think it's a wonderful thing because kids have a natural sense of wonder, and we got to make comics to get them interested into this again. And it's a shame kids are not reading comics.
Absolutely.
Right. I sorry to end it on a downer, but thank you so
much. There's not a downer at all. Not a downer at all. There's a nugget of hope in those words.
Thank you so much for coming. And don't be strange. I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Well, thank you for having me. Everybody in the chat, thank you for watching as well, and have a great night, John.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.